All right, so today we're diving deep into something you do every single day, right? I mean, we're talking habits, and we're using this book, Atomic Habits, to guide us. But this is going to be a little different than just like a typical book summary thing.
Yeah, we're going way deeper than that, right? Like really unpacking the how and why of habits,
Mhm.
uh, kind of looking at like the science behind them. And then hopefully you walk away knowing how to like build better ones.
Yeah, because I think we all know we should have good habits. You know, everybody's always saying that, like, oh, you got to be more productive, you got to be healthier. But how do you actually do that?
Well, that's the big question, right? And it's funny because the author of Atomic Habits, he kind of had this, well, it's pretty dramatic experience that led him to even think about all this stuff in the first place.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you about that. It involves like a baseball bat, right?
Yeah. Yeah, baseball bat. It's kind of a crazy story, but basically he was in this really bad accident, got hit in the face, had all these facial injuries, and the doctors weren't sure if he was going to be able to like walk again.
Oh, wow. So, pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, serious stuff. But it was during that like recovery process that he started to see how even these tiny, tiny improvements done day after day, they can lead to huge results over time.
And I mean, that's something we can all apply, right? Like, even if we're not recovering from a major injury, we all have those, those things we want to change about ourselves.
Absolutely. Like we want to, like I said, be more productive, right? Maybe finally learn that language we've been putting off, or just like stress less.
For sure. For sure. But you know what's funny? This book actually says that focusing on those big goals, the things we want to achieve, that might be part of the problem.
Yeah, that's one of the big ideas here. That whole like goal setting thing. It's not always the best approach.
Really? But, how do you know what you're working towards if you don't have a goal?
Well, the thing is, when you set a goal, you're basically saying, I'll be happy when I achieve this thing. So you're kind of putting your happiness off into the future.
Hmm. I see what you're saying. Like, you're always chasing that next milestone, and you never actually, feel satisfied with where you are now.
Exactly. And that's why this book, it shifts the focus away from goals and onto systems. Like instead of obsessing about that end result, you build these daily habits that like automatically move you in the right direction.
So it's more about the journey than the destination, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like instead of trying to force yourself to do something, you become the kind of person who just naturally does that thing.
Okay, I like that. It's about, becoming the type of person who, I don't know, who works out every day or who writes every morning or whatever it is you want to do.
Right, exactly. And then there's this other idea that really blew my mind when I first read the book. It's about the connection between your habits and your identity.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. Like, how your habits actually reflect who you think you are, even if you're not, consciously aware of it.
Exactly. So let's say you see yourself as, as a procrastinator. Well, guess what? You're probably going to keep procrastinating because that's how you're like defining yourself.
But if you shift that and start seeing yourself as, I don't know, as a productive person, then you're more likely to, actually get stuff done.
Right. It's about aligning your actions with your beliefs.
Hmm.
Your habits kind of reinforce your identity, and then your identity drives those habits.
So it's like a feedback loop, right? It all kind of works together.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about some of the like big ideas, the philosophy behind this whole thing. But if we actually want to start building better habits, where do we begin?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? Like, how do we actually put all this into practice?
Well, Atomic Habits breaks it down into 4 stages. It's a simple framework, but it's super powerful. And those stages are cue, craving, response, and reward.
Okay, I like it when things are simple and powerful. So, break those down for me. What's a cue in this habit world?
A cue is basically anything that triggers your brain to like start a behavior. It's like a signal that predicts a reward. Think about like walking past a bakery on your way to work,
Okay, so the bakery is the cue,
right? The smell, the sight, all of that. And then that cue triggers a craving.
which would be like the desire for a donut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then comes the response, which is you actually going into the bakery and buying the donut.
And then the reward is that, that sugar rush, that deliciousness.
Right. And so it's this whole cycle, right? It starts with a cue, which leads to a craving. Then you do the action, and then you get the reward, which reinforces the whole thing.
It's like a chain reaction happening in our brains every day.
And the best part is once you understand this cycle, you can actually like hack it. You can consciously design your habits by tweaking each of those stages.
Okay, that's what I like to hear. Give me the hacks, the tools, the strategies. So let's dive into each of those stages then and really figure out how we can make good habits obvious and attractive and easy and satisfying while making those bad habits a little less, well, a little less tempting. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Okay, so let's jump back into it. And let's talk about that first stage, the cue, and making that good habit obvious.
This is where I get tripped up, I think. Like, yeah, those cues trigger habits, but sometimes I don't even realize what the cue is, you know? It's like it's
Yeah.
happening on autopilot.
Yeah, that's how our brains are wired, right? We're picking up on those cues all the time without even thinking about it. It's like it's a survival thing, being able to recognize patterns and stuff.
Right, right. So how do we like bring those subconscious cues into our conscious awareness?
Well, one way is to do something the book calls a habits scorecard. Basically, it's just a list of everything you do in a day from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep.
So I'm like tracking every little thing. I eat breakfast, I brush my teeth, I scroll through social media for an hour, all of it.
Yep, all of it.
Yeah.
It might sound kind of intense, but it can be really, really eye-opening. You start to see these patterns,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, that's why I always end up doing that thing.
Okay, so let's say I've done my scorecard and I've like identified a bad habit I want to break. Let's say it's I don't know, watching too much TV. How do those cues help me actually change that?
Well, you got to think about the environment where that habit's happening, right? Like, is the remote always on the coffee table? Is the TV like always on in the background?
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. It's like background noise, even if I'm not really paying attention.
Right, but that's a cue. Right. So there's this principle in the book, make it invisible.
Hmm.
If you want to break a bad habit, make the keys less obvious.
So like hide the remote, put it in a drawer or something.
Exactly. Out of sight, out of mind. And then, on the flip side, if you want to build a good habit, you got to make those cues super obvious. Like if you want to read more, don't just leave the book on your shelf, put it right on your pillow.
So I literally can't miss it. I like that.
Right. It's about designing your environment,
Hmm.
setting yourself up for success. Another cool trick is this thing called pointing and calling.
Yeah.
You ever notice how, like, Japanese train conductors, they point at stuff and call out the actions they're doing?
I have seen that, yeah. I always thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, it looks funny, but it actually helps them avoid mistakes. And we could do the same thing with our habits.
So I'm walking around my house pointing at things and saying, I'm going to work out now. I'm eating a healthy salad.
Ah, well, it doesn't have to be that dramatic. But the idea is to, like, bring those actions into your conscious awareness. So before you, I don't know, grab another cookie, you say, okay, I'm about to eat this cookie.
It's like a little pause button, right? To make sure you're making the choice consciously.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got
Yeah.
making good habits obvious, bad habits invisible. But, sometimes even when we know what we should be doing, it's just not that appealing.
Oh, tell me about it. My brain wants the easy, fun stuff, not the things that are good for me in the long run.
That's because we're wired to crave those immediate rewards,
Yeah.
even if they're not the best for us.
It's that whole instant gratification thing.
So how do we fight that? One way is this thing called temptation bundling. It's basically you take something you need to do, something you don't really want to do, and you pair it with something you love to do.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Let's say you love watching reality TV, but you hate folding laundry.
That's oddly specific, but I relate.
Right. So you make a rule.
Mm-hmm.
You only watch your favorite show while you're folding laundry.
Ah, so I'm like tricking myself into getting that chore done because I'm associating it with something I actually enjoy.
Exactly. You're bundling the pleasure with with the not so pleasurable.
I like it. Okay, what else can we do to make those good habits more appealing?
Well, this is where your social environment comes in. The book talks about how we tend to imitate the habits of three groups of people: the close, the many, and the powerful.
Okay, remind me, who are those groups again?
So the close are the people you're around all the time, right? Family, friends, coworkers. The many is more like your broader social circle, community, online groups, that kind of thing. And the powerful are those people you like, admire, or look up to.
So if I want to start a new habit, it helps if I'm around other people who are already doing that habit?
Exactly. We're social creatures, right? We like to fit in. So if all your friends are going to the gym, you're more likely to go too.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got obvious, attractive. What was the next one?
Easy. Got to make it easy.
Oh, yeah. Because sometimes, even when I want to do something, it just feels like a chore. Like life gets in the way.
Right, so you got to remove the friction, make it
Oh.
simple as possible. And the book uses this really interesting example to illustrate this, the invention of the cash register.
A cash register. Okay, what does that have to do with habits?
Well, before cash registers, employees had easy access to all the cash, right?
Yeah.
Made stealing a lot easier.
So there wasn't any like system of accountability in place.
Exactly. But the cash register, it changed all that. It locked the money up, made it way harder to steal.
Okay, so I'm seeing the analogy here. If I want to build good habits, I got to make those good habits the easy choice.
Right. You got to like remove the obstacles that make it easy to slip back into those bad habits. Like, let's say you want to work out in the morning, but you hit snooze every time.
Oh, the snooze button. My worst enemy.
Well, instead of fighting that, you could, what if you prepared everything the night before? Like lay out your clothes, fill up your water bottle, put your gym bag by the door.
So when I wake up, it's like there's no excuse. Everything's ready to go.
Exactly. You're making it easy. Another tip, break the habit down into something tiny, like 2 minutes.
So instead of saying I'm going to go for a run, I say I'm going to put on my running shoes.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of automation, too. Set up automatic bill pay, use a meal kit service, anything you can do to like take those decisions out of your hands.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so we've made it obvious, attractive, easy. What's the last piece of this habit puzzle?
Satisfying. You got to make it satisfying.
But isn't that the hard part? Like good habits, the reward is often way down the road. But bad habits, those feel good right away.
Right, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
So we got to find ways to make those good habits feel good now. And one of the best ways to do that is habit tracking.
Oh, yeah, I've tried those apps. There's something about seeing that streak, like knowing I'm making progress, that feels good.
It's visual proof, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you need a little extra something, a little reward.
So, like, I give myself a treat every time I complete the habit. Doesn't that seem kind of dangerous?
It can be, yeah. But the key is to choose a reward that's like meaningful to you and something that aligns with your overall goals.
So, if my goal is to save money, my reward shouldn't be to, like, go shopping.
But probably not. Maybe it's putting that saved money into a special account, something you're saving up for.
So I'm like visually seeing that progress and that itself becomes the reward. I like that.
Right. Okay. But even with all this, there are going to be times when we just don't feel like doing the habit,
Hmm.
right? Motivation dips, life happens. So how do we stay on track?
Yeah, because willpower alone, it's not enough. I know that from experience.
That's where accountability comes in. Having someone, to help keep you on track can make a huge difference.
Okay, but I don't want someone like breathing down my neck all the time.
No, no, not like that. It can be really positive, like just having a friend you check in with or joining a group or even just telling someone your goals so they can ask you about them.
It's like having a cheerleader in your corner, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's rooting for you.
Exactly. And if you want to get really serious about it, you could create a habit contract.
A contract. Is this like a legally binding thing?
No, it's just like a written agreement, either with yourself or with an accountability partner, where you lay out the habit, the consequences if you don't do it, and the rewards if you do.
So I could say, if I miss my workout today, I have to, I don't know, donate to a charity I hate.
Exactly. Or do an extra chore or something like that. The point is, it's got to be something that motivates you.
This is so interesting. I never thought about habits in this way before. It's really making me see that like it's not about being a certain type of person. It's about like understanding the mechanics of it all.
Exactly. You're not like born with good habits or bad habits. You build them, you can design them.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, those 4 stages, all the strategies, but what about personality? Like how does that factor in? Does it matter if I'm like naturally more disciplined or more spontaneous?
That's a great question. And it leads us to another really cool idea in the book, playing to your strengths.
Okay, I like the sound of that. So instead of like forcing myself to do habits that I hate, I should focus on habits that like come naturally to me.
Exactly. The book argues that the easiest habits to stick with are the ones that are like enjoyable, the ones you actually want to do,
Yeah.
where you have some natural talent or passion.
It's like finding your superpower and then using it to, build a life you love.
Right. And the author uses this really interesting example to illustrate this. These sisters, the Polgar sisters, they were chess prodigies. And their whole story is about how their parents created this environment that made chess like irresistible to them.
Okay, now I gotta hear about these chess prodigies.
So basically, these three sisters, they grew up in this house that was just like filled with chess, books, pictures, you name it. They played against each other all the time, competed in tournaments.
So they were like immersed in it from a young age.
Right. But the key is their parents made it fun. They didn't force them to play. They encouraged them. They celebrated their successes.
So they associated chess with positive feelings, not with pressure or stress.
Exactly. And that's the lesson for us, right? When we choose habits that align with our strengths, our interests, we're more likely to stick with them. Not because we have to, but because we want to.
So how do we figure out what those habits are? Like, how do we find our superpower habits?
You got to do a little soul searching. Explore your interests, experiment with different things.
So maybe I try like a bunch of different activities, painting, coding, whatever, and see what feels good.
Yeah, exactly. And as you experiment, pay attention to the things that feel like effortless. The things you could do for hours and not even realize it.
So it's not just about what I'm good at, it's about what I enjoy doing, what feels like meaningful to me.
Exactly. Because the more you enjoy it, the more likely you are to stick with it. And that brings us to one of the most important lessons in the book, showing up.
Okay, what do you mean by showing up, like physically being present?
Well, yeah, kinda. But it's more about being consistent. Even when you don't feel like it. Sticking to the schedule no matter what.
That sounds hard. What about those days when I just have zero motivation?
Well, that's what separates the amateurs from the professionals.
Ooh, I want to be a professional. Tell me more.
Professionals, they stick to the plan even when it's tough. They show up even when they're tired or bored or uninspired.
So it's not about waiting for that, like, burst of inspiration. It's about just doing the work, day in and day out, no matter what.
Exactly. Remember that weightlifting coach we talked about earlier? He said the key to success is being able to handle the boredom of training.
Yeah, the best athletes, they're not always the most, like, passionate ones. They're the ones who just put in the work consistently.
Right. And this applies to everything, not just athletics. Writing, business, music, parenting, whatever it is. You got to embrace that boredom of training because that's where the mastery comes from.
Okay, so how do we get better at showing up? Any tips for those days when it's a struggle?
Well, one thing is to make your habits so small and easy that they're almost impossible to skip. Remember the 2-minute rule.
Yeah, start small, build from there.
Exactly. And accountability helps too. Having someone to check in with to keep you motivated. And don't forget about those rewards.
True, true. And, it's okay to have off days, right? We're not aiming for perfection here.
Definitely not. The key is to not let those off days turn into off weeks or off months. Get back on track as soon as you can.
So we've talked about playing to our strengths, showing up consistently. What else can we do to make sure these habits actually stick for the long haul?
That's a good question. And it leads us to our final principle, keeping it fresh.
Keeping it fresh, does that mean I need to be constantly changing my routine, trying new things all the time?
Not necessarily, but there's a balance, right, between consistency and novelty.
Okay, I'm listening.
This is where the Goldilocks rule comes in.
The Goldilocks rule, like the porridge that's not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. It applies to habits too. Basically, we're most motivated when the task is just the right level of challenge. Not too easy, not too hard.
So if it's too easy, I get bored. Too hard, I get discouraged. But if it's in that sweet spot, then I stay, engaged.
Exactly. Now, the thing is, as habits become more routine, they can also become, well, less interesting.
Yeah, I've definitely been there.
So how do we keep it fresh? One way is to gradually increase the difficulty. So if you're running a mile a day, maybe you bump it up to a mile and a half, then 2 miles.
So I'm constantly challenging myself, but I'm not making it too hard too soon.
Exactly. Another way is to experiment with variation. So instead of always running on the treadmill, maybe you run outside or take a dance class.
The key is to keep it interesting, right?
Right. Now I know what you're thinking. Isn't the whole point of habits to create routines, to make things automatic? And that's true, but you also don't want to get too stuck in a rut.
So it's about finding that balance. Routine, but with enough novelty to keep things fun.
Exactly. And here's something interesting. A little bit of boredom can actually be a good thing.
Wait, what? How can boredom be good?
Well, think back to that weightlifting coach, right? He talked about the boredom of training.
Right, right. The best athletes are the ones who can push through that. But why is that important?
Because those moments, those stretches of repetition and practice, they're actually building mental toughness. discipline.
So it's like training my brain to stay focused, even when it's not super exciting.
Exactly. And that's crucial for like any long-term goal.
Oh,
Okay, so we've covered a ton of stuff today. Let's take a minute to kind of wrap it all up.
okay, yeah. So let's do that. I mean, we've talked about a lot. Like, where do we even begin to apply all this stuff?
Yeah, it's a little overwhelming, honestly. Like I'm sitting here thinking about all the habits I want to change, and it's like, whoa, okay, slow down. Yeah, I get it. And that's why it's so important to like you don't have to do everything at once, right? Pick one thing, one habit you want to focus on.
Okay, so like instead of trying to become, I don't know, a marathon runner overnight, I could start with something smaller, like drinking more water every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then once you got that one habit, you can add another one and another one. It's like building momentum.
And as I build those habits, I'm also like changing how I see myself, right? I start thinking, oh, I'm the kind of person who drinks a lot of water, or I'm the kind of person who works out regularly.
Right. That identity shift is huge. It's
Yes.
like it all kind of reinforces itself.
It's that, what was it, the feedback loop?
Exactly. And, as you go, you can like tweak things, experiment, see what works best for you.
So it's not about like finding the perfect system. It's about figuring out what helps me build better habits.
Right. It's a process, it's a
Yeah.
journey. And there are going to be bumps along the way. That's normal.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. Pick one habit you've been struggling with, and think about just one of the strategies we talked about today.
Yeah. What's one tiny change you can make, like right now, to start moving in the right direction?
Remember, those small changes, they can make a huge difference over time.
That's what Atomic Habits is all about.
Okay, well, that's about it for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, we hope you learned something and that you're feeling, I don't know, maybe a little inspired to start building some better habits, even if it's just one small step at a time.
It was great talking about all this with you.
Yeah, this was fun. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.